What's up guys, Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. And man, it has been some time since I last said that. So before we move any further, how about you guys beat up the like button, maybe put the like button in self-isolation, really beat it up, put it in self-isolation, and then we're going to move on with this podcast. I thought it would be a cool thing to kind of open up this video with a little smoke break. So we haven't spoke for 2 or 3 weeks now, getting on to past a month maybe. So we're going to spend 2 minutes, start this episode with a little smoke break, and then have another one later on. So guys, this is a crazy time. The UFC 249 full card has been released. It got released last night. According to Dana White, he's going to be flying these fighters out to a private island, which is completely crazy. We haven't heard anything of a private island in the last few weeks. We've heard Russia, Belarus, Florida, Indian reservation. We've heard a lot of things, but a private island is absolutely crazy. Some of you guys may think, this event probably shouldn't be going ahead. The next week event shouldn't be going ahead. Events after this shouldn't be going ahead. Some of you guys are over the moon that MMA is back. What I will say, selfish or not, I am extremely grateful that MMA is back. Will this event still go ahead? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But Dana White is very adamant that fights will happen. This event will go ahead. Obviously, we have no Khabib for this event, but Justin Gaethje stepping in to fight Tony Ferguson, that's going to be completely mental. I can't wait for that main event. So without further ado, let's get into UFC 249, because I've spent all night researching these fights, and as soon as I woke up, I spent hours and hours researching the rest of this card. So I feel like after a day and a half, I'm ready to break down and predict these fights. First fight on this card, we have Ryan Superman Spann versus Sam Smiling Alvey. And we're going to start with Ryan Spann. So Ryan comes into this fight 3-0 inside the UFC, training out of Fortis MMA. Ryan is a super long light heavyweight, 6'5" with an 81-inch reach. Primarily a striker inside the octagon, and he's looked pretty good so far in his UFC career. Finishes over Lil Nog and Devin Clark. Both of those finishes were very nice finishes. There's no denying Spann is a dangerous striker. The length of him will always have opponents guessing the range they are safe at. Sam Alvey comes into this fight 10-8 inside the UFC. Also primarily a striker. Sam spent most of his career at 185. He moved up to 205 roughly 2 years ago now, and I'm not too sure how much of a good move that's been for Sam Alvey. Sam isn't really known for his footwork. He becomes quite flat-footed inside the octagon, and that's primarily because Sam's looking to catch you with a classic Sam Alvey counterpunch. This is a pretty good matchup to start the card. Sam has the experience in fighting better opponents, but Spann is going to have the advantage when it comes to body frame. Ryan Spann is a true light heavyweight, whereas Sam Alvey isn't. When I picture this fight in a footwork scenario, like the guy who will move and understand situations better, again I lean towards Ryan Spann. The length, the speed, the power, the confidence. I feel everything points towards Ryan Spann in this matchup. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Ryan Spann via TKO in round number 1. And we take a look at some odds to start this card. We have Ryan Spann coming in minus 275, minus 280, minus 305. Sam Alvey coming back plus 210, plus 220, plus 240. So yeah, we have a strong favourite in Ryan, strong underdog in Sam Alvey, and you can't really argue with it too much. Sam isn't really a light heavyweight. whereas Ryan Spann really looks like a true light heavyweight. So picturing this fight, you would expect Ryan Spann to have some really nice moments. So yeah, Ryan Spann minus 300 basically. I'm willing to take maybe at least 1 or 2 parlays with that. Fight number 2, we have Sijara Sarge Eubanks versus Sarah Cheesecake Morris. And we're going to start with Sijara Eubanks. So Sarge comes into this fight 2-2 inside the UFC. Primarily a grappler inside the octagon, a black belt in BJJ, and a very strong wrestler to go with her jiu-jitsu. As a striker, I wouldn't say she's at her best there, but I definitely wouldn't count her striking out. I've really noticed with Sijara Eubanks, she's a much better fighter when she's coming forward, dictating the dance. When she's tired and moving back, like she was against Beth Correa, and even against Aspen Ladd in the 3rd round, you know, she's losing those moments. I even took Beth Correa as a big underdog against Sijara, purely because I noticed when Sijara tires and she starts to move back and backpedals a lot, her defensive boxing isn't good. You know, in that 1st round, powerful boxing, you know, dictates the dance, comes forward, looks really good with her grappling, her wrestling. You know, she's a very strong athlete overall. But when she gets a little fatigued, you can see the holes in her game. The opponent, Sarah Morris, comes into this fight 3 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a jiu-jitsu practitioner and quite a good one too. She's got a win in her last fight against a European prospect in Liana Jojua. In that performance, she did what she's always done. Look to take down the opponent, land some nice ground and pound, and look to work towards a submission. If she isn't feeling advancing position, she'll simply keep you down, hold you down, and look to beat you up. Stylistically, we have 2 grapplers facing up against each other here. Both of these fighters are good wrestlers and good with their jiu-jitsu too. So it's hard to be confident in either lady. Eubanks does suffer with her conditioning, like I said earlier. When she becomes tired and starts to circle, backpedal a little more, she really isn't a dangerous fighter anymore. On the flip side, I would still say Sarah Morris, it is probably worse defensively, you know. Sarah Morris eats a lot of shots on the feet, and Sarge has pretty powerful boxing in that 1st round at least. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Sijara Eubanks via decision. And we're going to take a look at some odds in that matchup if I can find them. We have Eubanks coming in minus 300, minus 320. Sarah Morris coming back plus 250, plus 260. Yeah, I disagree with the line. I'd say the line is very off by 100 at least. You know, if I'm picturing Sijara Eubanks a favourite, man, it's maybe minus 200 to get up to minus 340. You know, and gassing out the way she did against Beth Correa. The 1st round looked very good. You know, the 1st round for Sijara Eubanks looks pretty good all the time. You'd assume she's maybe working on her fatigue in fights. So, yeah, minus 340, minus 320 is a little too much. But I am going to stick with the favourite there and probably not play her in any bets. Moving into the next one, we have Michael the Menace Johnson versus Karma the Death Star Worthy. And this is a very decent matchup. We're going to start with the veteran. Michael Johnson comes into this fight 11 wins, 11 losses inside the UFC. 22 UFC fights, and he's 50-50 on win-loss percentages, which is pretty crazy. Johnson is primarily a boxer inside the octagon, and he's in quite a rough patch in his career at the moment. Lost both of his last 2 fights, arguably seconds away from winning a decision over Josh Emmett before he was completely knocked dead. And even against Stevie Ray, I felt he could have been given a 29-28 decision win, but the judges didn't see it that way. Despite the rough patch Johnson's in, we know how good of a striker Michael Johnson is and can be. Class is permanent, and Michael Johnson is a class fighter. Khama Worthy comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Huge upset win in his debut. Cashed as a plus 600 underdog against Devontae Smith. If you nailed that pick, absolutely fair play to you. Worthy is a southpaw striker, very jerky in his hand motions. And come to think of it, so is Michael Johnson. Both of these guys are very jerky in their upper body and hand motions, their feints. You know, constantly moving the upper body and the hands. It's never set in stone. They're never in one position with their body. They're constantly jerky, feint type motions from both of these guys. Before Khama Worthy caught Devontae Smith with that nasty hook, he was landing a lot of inside calf kicks. That was also very noticeable in his debut. So both of these guys are strikers, and like I just said, they're similar in their feints. However, Johnson is a conventional fighter and Khama is a southpaw fighter. So they're going to be fighting with a similar style but different stances. So it's going to be quite interesting to see who gets their range first. Khama may be more likely to deliver kicks to Johnson, whereas Johnson will be more likely to look to find his range with his jab. If both of these guys put on boxing gloves and boxed it out, I would lean towards Michael Johnson. You know, he's a very good boxer. He's proven it over the last, quite few years in the UFC. He's very, very quick with his hands, very good combinations, looks to target the body and the head, very good speed. Michael Johnson with his boxing. So for those reasons, man, I have to stick with Michael Johnson here. Obviously, it does take a little bit of faith to make that pick because he isn't the most consistent or reliable fighter. 11 wins, 11 losses. It does show he isn't the most reliable, but I'd still have to stick with him here. He's a very, very good boxer, and I like him in this type of matchup, at least on paper. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Michael Johnson via decision. And we take a look at the odds. We have Michael coming in minus 250, Khama Worthy plus 200. So you're not getting Khama plus 600 in his debut, but you are getting him at still good underdog odds. Plus 200 is a good line. Maybe this line is a little bit off. Stevie Ray did have some nice moments with his boxing against Michael Johnson. And I don't really picture Stevie Ray much of a boxer, more of a grappler and a jiu-jitsu fighter. So Khama Worthy does have a good chance here. He is a jerky type of fighter, just like Michael Johnson, fighting out of the southpaw stance. It may be hard for Johnson to get his range. I wouldn't put the odds there, but I'd still have to stick with Michael Johnson and maybe wait for his line to come down and play him in at least one parlay. Fight number 4. So we're 4 fights in, man, and I'm getting the feeling that Dana White was not lying when he said he's going to put together one of the baddest cards we've ever seen. This is fight number 4. Marlon Chito Vera versus Ray, the Mexican Devil Borg. Wow. We're going to start with Marlon Vera. So Vera comes into this fight 9 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a dog inside the octagon. Just a nasty, nasty guy. Now on a 5-fight kill streak, finishing the last 5 of his opponents. Some via TKO and some via submission. Marlon Vera does not discriminate when it comes to finishing a fight. A serious dark horse in the 135 weight class, a threat to any man. Ray Borg comes into this fight 7 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a wrestler inside the octagon. Ray Borg spent some good time at 125, now fighting at 135. He went back to 125 in his last fight, missed weight, so he had to return to 35. I said it a couple months ago for Ray's last fight. Ray is a professional grinder. His scrambling ability is second to none. His conditioning, determination, the will not to quit. Ray Borg will feed off of fatigue. Showing Ray a sign of fatigue is never a good idea. This guy is a specialist at working hard inside the octagon. This is a quality matchup. I much prefer Ray Borg at 125 than 135, but if he can't make the cut, then 35 is your only option. There's no doubt in my mind Ray Borg is the better wrestler. He'll be the stronger guy in this fight too. However, looking at the frames of these guys, it's evident that Marlon Vera is the true bantamweight in this fight. He'll have a 4-inch height advantage and a 7-inch reach advantage. If this fight is kept in a kickboxing scenario, I don't see Marlon having too much trouble with the frame and speed of Ray Borg. The quick, powerful entries, the constant takedowns, that's where I see Ray having success in this fight. That's what he's good at. You know, he's a professional grinder. It's really tough to make a pick in this one. The paths are quite clear for both of these fighters. But here's my final verdict on this matchup. Marlon Vera has the frame, the BJJ off his back, and the tools on the feet, in my opinion, to outclass Ray Borg. So for those reasons, I'm going to take the dark horse of the 135 weight class here. So my pick is Marlon Vera via decision. And we're going to take a look at some odds with that matchup. We have Marlon Vera plus 120. Ray Borg coming in minus 140. Man, I have to disagree a little bit with that line. It's kind of understandable a little bit, but the recency bias thing is a real thing in MMA. Ray Borg was an underdog against Bontorin and kind of disagreed with that, and now he's coming in minus 150. Does he have the tools to beat Marlon? I would say yes. But Marlon Vera is proving a lot, man. He's a nasty, nasty guy in there. So that will be an underdog pick for me. Fight number 5, we have Alexander, the Great Hernandez versus Omar Morales. And we're going to start with Hernandez. So Alex Hernandez comes into this fight, 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. An extremely athletic guy. You only have to watch him bulldoze Benil in his debut to see how athletically gifted Hernandez is. Against Orbin Mercia, he showcased his wrestling. Alex has been wrestling since 13 years old. He's a very, very strong wrestler. He ran into a bit of veteran trouble against Donald Cerrone, which we can't argue too much about. Alex is a baby in the fight game. Donald Cerrone is a veteran in the fight game. Looking back at Hernandez's last fight, although he won that fight, I was quite disappointed. He completely disengaged from the fight and backpedaled pretty much the whole time. It's kind of understandable though. At the same time, you know, he suffered a bad loss and it clearly broke him mentally. You can see that in his performance. It did not look like the Alex Hernandez that we was beginning to learn. The opponent, Omar Morales, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Now this guy is very, very powerful. A good leg kicker and a powerful puncher, man. Before getting his debut in the UFC, he was able to get an impressive TKO win on the Contender Series over Harvey Park. Beautiful, beautiful performance in that fight. Nasty low kicks right up until the finish. Standing and trading with Omar Morales is a dangerous game to play. For a guy who's only 9-0 as a pro, don't be deceived by this guy when it comes to striking. Serious power, the sort of power that will shut any lightweight's lights out. This is another really, really decent matchup on this return card. wrestler versus striker. Alex kind of seems to be getting a step down in competition, and maybe that's because of how surprising his last fight was. You know, the performance was quite surprising. So maybe the UFC are trying to see where Alex is mentally. Omar, on the flip side, getting a big step up in competition from his debut win in the UFC. And you can't argue with that either. You know, Omar is 34 years old, hasn't got too much time at the highest level. So if he's getting his debut done in impressive fashion, why not shoot him up the ladder a bit? So this is a really fun fight to think about, but I have to stick with the wrestler. Alex Hernandez is a very, very powerful wrestler. And, you know, I've mentioned it twice now. The last fight wasn't great to watch, but I'm sure he knows that too. He knows that too. He's going to go back, work on things, and hopefully we see the Alex Hernandez that we know in this fight. And if we see that guy, I think we're going to see Alex shooting for a takedown here and there in that first round and look to really dominate this matchup. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Alex Hernandez via decision. And we have Alex coming in minus 215, minus 220. And then we have him minus 275, minus 240. So a strong favourite on Alex Hernandez. We don't really know how strong yet. It seems to be somewhere in the 200s. Maybe low end, maybe high end come fight night. But strong favourite on Alex Hernandez that I can't really argue too much with. You know, he's a very athletic guy. He's a beast of a guy, really. Omar Morales coming back plus 180, plus 200, which, you know, could be a good bet if he wins, I guess. You know, any underdog that wins is a good bet. Omar Morales has a lot of power and he's a strong leg kicker. But if Hernandez has overcome that hump in the road, you know, Francis Ngannou also had that mental block after the loss to Stipe. You know, if he's overcome that, I would expect Alex Hernandez to have a very, very good fight here. So maybe a couple parlays on Alex Hernandez. Fight number 6, we have Ronaldo Jacare Souza versus Uriah Primetime Hall. And we're going to start with the Brazilian. So Jacare comes into this fight 9 wins, 5 losses inside the UFC. Primarily one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners we've ever seen. A 4th degree black belt with over 20 years experience in jiu-jitsu. Recently, I've highlighted the fact that Jacare has turned into a nasty striker over the years. Guys started to figure out Jacare as this submission guy. If you could keep the fight standing, you could beat this guy. So Jacare evolved, and that's when we started to see him win via strikes. Opponents were too worried to be taken down, which left them open to strikes. Some people may hear that and say, well, how has that opened the opponent up for strikes if the opponent is already hesitant for the takedown? My answer to that would be, if you're thinking only about the takedown, you don't see the head kick coming. Ask that to Derek Brunson or even Chris Weidman recently. You know, nasty strikes to the finish from Jacare. The opponent, Uriah Hall, comes into this fight 8 wins, 7 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon, and a very, very good one too. Extremely unorthodox in his attacks. It only takes a split second of Uriah's unorthodox style to hurt the opponent. You can find evidence of that, especially against Bevan Lewis. Uriah was getting beat up the whole time in that fight, right up until the finish. Looking at Uriah's most recent performance, he done very, very well against a strong grappler in Shoeface. I can remember Uriah was maybe a plus 120, plus 130 underdog, you know, and that was a good bet to take. Very close fight, but he was able to strike for good amounts of time in that fight. Despite overcoming a good grappler in his last one, we do have to admit Uriah has struggled with grappling in the past, and probably will struggle with grappling again. I respect both of these fighters. Uriah has one of the best spinning finishes we've ever seen. A couple, actually. Jacare is one of the nastiest wrestling submission fighters we'll ever see also. Both of these guys have clear paths to victory. If this fight hits the mat, Jacare, I'm assuming, is fighting a good fight. If this fight is kept upright, you'd assume Uriah is fighting a good fight. You could make arguments for both sides. In my opinion, this fight really is a pick'em. Something tells me, though, that with no fans in attendance, I just see Jacare being able to get to the grappling maybe quicker than he would have before, and maybe take down Uriah Hall and potentially submit him. So for those reasons, I am going to take Jacare via submission in round number 2. And just a quick heads up for anyone who cares, the last time I picked Jacare was February 2017 against Tim Bosch. So yeah, I'm not this guy's biggest fan. He is getting on a bit, but in this fight, I just see him being able to get it to the mat and get a submission. And he hasn't submitted a guy in quite a few years. Maybe that was his last submission too. So yeah, the pick is going to be Jacare. And we take a look at some odds. We have Jacare coming in -140, -150. Uriah Hall +130, +125, +135. So Uriah, small underdog again. Man, these fights just get better and better as the card goes on. Francis the Predator Ngannou versus Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. And we're going to start with the Predator. Francis Ngannou comes into this fight 9 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. An absolute animal. As Dana White once said, this man hits as hard as a Ford Escort going as fast as it can. The world record for punching power. And can you argue with it? Absolutely not, in my opinion. Joe Rogan describes Francis as a superhero movie character. Can you argue with that? Probably not, man. The speed, the power of Francis defies superhuman. Completely destroyed Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez and JDS in his last 3 fights. Does he deserve another title shot? In my opinion, absolutely. The opponent, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, comes into this fight 4-0 inside the UFC. A very talented striker. Prior to his MMA days, he was a kickboxer. Over 7 years, he went 76-8 in kickboxing. 64 of those wins via knockout. We've seen so far in Rozenstruik's UFC career, he's got the death touch. Whether it's the 5th round or the 1st round, Rozenstruik is talented enough and powerful enough to put you out at any moment. Do not be deceived by this man's footwork. His ability to kick and land a nasty combination is nothing short of brilliant. The combination he put Albini away with was something out of a video game. I'm really excited for this matchup. Both of these heavyweights are very, very talented heavyweights. Both huge punchers. If we're looking for our answer for this fight on paper, I'd say Rozenstruik is the better striker. When you're speaking about fundamentals and experience and know-how, I'd lean towards Rozenstruik. However, Francis Ngannou could sleep a plane. He could sleep a plane, man. That man has godly power that would terrify anyone. You know, the difference, in my opinion, is footwork. Rozenstruik becomes too stationary. Against Francis, that's not a good thing. You know, it leaves the head in a stationary position for Francis to decapitate, you know, and that's what I see happening in this fight. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Francis Ngannou via TKO in round number 1. And we take a look at some odds, if I can find them. We have Francis minus 300, Rozenstruik plus 230, plus 240, plus 250. So that's another one of those lines where we don't really know how big of a favourite Francis Ngannou is going to be. We don't know how much action is going to come in on Rozenstruik. But minus 3, you know, I'm still willing to play that with Francis Ngannou. The guy's an animal. You know, I don't know how he moves as quick as he does. You know, from where the punch starts to the target, which is the skull, it's so quick. I don't know how he's that quick for the size of man he is. And every fight, he looks like he's understanding movement and just fighting more and more. You know, he hasn't been fighting a long time. He's still learning. But every fight, he looks more dangerous. So, yeah, the pick is going to be Francis Ngannou there. All right, homies, you know what time it is. It's been a few weeks. I've missed this time, this enjoyable smoke time with you guys. So let's get back to it. Let's just pretend nothing's happened, you know. Let's just get straight back to it. Okay, so I'm glad it's smoke time because I have a few things to mention to you guys. So I'm going to start with the first one. I forgot to mention at the start of this video, I know you guys saw the pictures for the Brazil card. Really, really nice profit on that card. This was the poll. We had 452 votes coming in, 32% on the Bronx, 68% on Kevin Lee. As always, make sure you have your vote on this main event at the community tab. It will be shown every single week, so you may as well go and vote. Number 2, I will start to track all the underdogs that I hit this year. So if you want to see the underdogs I've hit this year so far, go to the description below. I will update it every single week. Now I know maybe a couple of these fighters closed as favourites, slight favourites, but I did catch them at underdog, the underdog moment. You know, I caught them opening up and before they changed to a favourite. So I will still count those as underdog picks, although they may have not closed as favourites. As underdogs, sorry. Man, this is some good stuff. Number 3. Gaming and talking MMA. I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start streaming some gameplay on Xbox. And I want to speak some MMA with you guys at the same time. I think that would be a really cool thing to do. Maybe once or twice a week. Maybe my first stream will be tonight, tomorrow. I don't know when. But I do want it to be a regular thing that I do at least 2 times a week. I think that would be a really cool thing to do. I will be doing it over at Mixer. But I will live stream on YouTube to let you guys know when I'm live at Mixer, because, you know, I have a YouTube following here, not a Mixer following. If it was easier to broadcast and live stream gameplay to YouTube, I would do that, but it's not. It's not an easy thing to do with the Xbox apparently, so it will be streamed and live streamed over at Mixer, not on YouTube, but I'll still let you guys know on YouTube when I'm going live. I hope you guys are having a nice smoke break. The last thing I have to mention to you guys before we get into the main event for this card, during this time off, I've made different types of videos, right? There's not been any fight cards. I can't do my bread and butter. You know, this is what my channel is. It's breaking down fights. I love to do that. I miss reading all these comments. I've really missed what we've been doing this last whole year and a half. You know, it's been gone for the last month. So I've made different types of videos, so please check those out if you have time. First fight on this main event card, we have Jeremy Lil Heathen Stevens versus Calvin, the Boston finisher Kattar. And we're going to start with the veteran. So Jeremy Stevens comes into this fight, 15 wins, 16 losses, 1 no contest inside the UFC. So this will be his 33rd UFC fight. A true veteran of fighting. If you've never seen Jeremy Stevens fight, for those who haven't, this guy is a dog. He's walking forward, eating your shots to give his shots. Tough as nails, just a true fighter. It doesn't surprise me Jeremy Stephens is fighting on this card. I've said it before. Jeremy Stephens is the type of guy to fight without a training camp, to fight in a car park if he had to. Just a true savage. Obviously with this one-dimensional style, walk forward and take your head off type of style, it's not the best way to be consistent. Like I said for Jacare earlier, if guys are figuring you out, you have to evolve. And Jeremy Stephens hasn't really evolved. Calvin Kattar comes into this fight 4-2 inside the UFC, primarily a striker inside the octagon, a boxer to be precise. Calvin loves to use the high guard. He'll keep his hands nice and high and pop the jab from there. He's coming off a loss to Zabit, where he was just basically outclassed. The boxing style wasn't enough to overcome Zabit, but losses like that will make Calvin Kattar a better fighter. I'm really excited for this matchup. Once again, huge respect to both of these fighters. Stephens is a guy we've known for many years. We know what he's about. We know he's going to go in there, walk forward, look for kill shot after kill shot, maybe invest in the low kick the way Moicano did against Kattar too. Calvin has really sharp boxing, beautiful sharp boxing. I do see him having success with his jab early and often. The difference for me is fundamentals. The majority of this fight I feel is going to be boxing. I don't really see either guy grappling too much. And as a boxer, I'd prefer to be on Kattar's side. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Calvin Kattar via decision. And we take a look at some odds. We have Calvin minus 230, minus 240, minus 250, minus 278. That's insane. Jeremy Stephens coming back basically plus 200. That line seems a little bit off to me. But at the same time, I can kind of argue what I'm saying, you know. Calvin Kattar is a very good boxer. Jeremy Stephens is a brawler boxer, you know. So stylistically, it seems like a good matchup for Calvin. But he does have that high guard and leaves himself quite open to low kicks. If Jeremy Stephens goes for the low kick to slow down Calvin Kattar, it could really turn into his fight. I think the line is a little bit off. And as I said that, the line actually just disappeared. So I think some money's coming in. I don't know what's happening, but the line just disappeared. But I will stick with Calvin Kattar there. Fight number 9, another really, really good matchup on this card. We have Vicente, the silent assassin Luque, versus Nico, the hybrid Price. And we're going to start with the Brazilian. So Vicente comes into this fight 10 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. An absolute killer. Another killer on this card. Quite a well-rounded guy too. A brown belt in BJJ and a powerful, dangerous kickboxer. He's coming off a loss to Stephen Thompson, which isn't a bad thing. We know how great Stephen Thompson is with his movement and kicking ability. Luque would have learnt a lot in that type of fight. The tools Luque already has makes him a world-class fighter. The short chopping hooks, the low kicks that he implements too. Luque is a killer. The opponent, Nico the hybrid Price, comes into this fight 7-3 inside the UFC. How many times am I going to have to say it on this card? We have another killer. Nico Price is a ball of unorthodox danger. You look at Nico's last 3 finishes. The up kick against James Vick where he sent him into a new dimension. The comeback against Tim Means. And the hammer fists from the bottom against Randy Brown. Unbelievable finishes. Nico Price does not discriminate when it comes to putting you out. This guy has unbelievable heart inside the octagon. It's something special, to be honest. Now, I haven't mentioned yet, both of these guys have already fought each other. This is a rematch. And I kind of forgot about that when I was looking at the tape for this fight. But, you know, forgetting about the first fight is always a good sign that a rematch is necessary. In the first fight, Luque dictated the dance. The low kick he landed against Nico really helped towards getting the finish in that fight. And Luque even finished that fight with a submission. So once again, really showing us how well-rounded he is. I do believe both of these guys have evolved very well over the last 2 to 3 years. Despite the evolution in both of their game, it's hard to imagine this fight playing out much differently than their first fight. Luque loves to fight in the pocket, and he does so very well. I think most of this fight is going to be spent in the pocket because both of these guys are very, very dangerous. You know, they're very dangerous guys, and I don't see this going the full 15. So I do have to stick with the original outcome in this match, and that's going to be Vicente Luque via TKO in round number 2. I don't know if he got finished in the second or the third. I believe it was could have been the third, but I'm going to take round 2 here. So the pick is Luque TKO round 2. And the odds on this fight, we have another strong favourite on this card, man. Slightly disagree again with the odds. Luque minus 250. Nico Price coming back plus 200. Both of these guys are killers. You know, Nico Price has evolved very well over the last few years, and he does have the tools to win this fight. But Luque, man, is so composed. You know, fundamentally very strong. His base, how composed he is with the distance that he keeps from himself and the opponent. You know, he fights very close to the opponent and does so in such a composed manner. You know, the loss to Wonderboy is because Luque couldn't fight in the pocket. Wonderboy's always exiting left or right. You know, he's always moving, using the kicks as the jab. I don't see Nico Price doing that. You know, Nico Price is a crazy guy. He's going to try to finish Luque, and I think Luque is going to have openings in this fight. Fight number 10, we have Greg, the Prince of War, Hardy versus Yorgan de Castro. And we're going to start with Greg Hardy. So Greg comes into this fight 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 no contest inside the UFC. What can I say about Greg Hardy? For those of you who don't know, he's a very controversial fighter. Not many, if any, would use an inhaler during a fight to open your lungs up. But hey, Greg Hardy did. There's been a couple things Greg Hardy has done that people don't like. But talking about him as a fighter, he is becoming more experienced every fight. His best trait would be how athletically gifted he is. His frame, his ability to move that frame in ways other 250-pound men can't. Greg is also surprisingly accurate with his power punches. He's not like a Ben Sassoli where he'll just throw his hands. He is technically better than that. The opponent, Yorgan de Castro, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Also fought on the Contender Series, where he was able to get a beautiful finish via leg kicks, calf kicks to be precise. I believe his name was Alton Meek. Just calf kick after calf kick, and Yorgan was able to stop him purely with kicks. Pretty amazing to see. In his UFC debut, Yorgan was able to beat Justin Tafa to the kill shot, left him sleeping on the canvas. Also another very impressive performance from Castro. I've seen a couple of Yorgan's fights prior to the Contender Series, but it's safe to say we're still in the learning process with Yorgan. We're always in the learning process with all of these fighters, but a guy who's 6-0 as a professional, we're still in the learning process with Yorgan. This is a heavyweight fight. Absolutely anything can happen. The human brain goes to sleep when it gets spun the wrong way. Heavyweights have unbelievable power, and their brain stays the same as other humans. So, yeah, the chances of this going 15, I don't see it happening. I feel someone is going to go to sleep here, and I'm sure we're going to be split on this fight too, right? A lot of you guys are going to be very impressed with Yorgan De Castro, and you are going to go that way, a few of you guys are going to say, you know what, Greg Hardy isn't the best fighter, but this is a fair step down from Volkov, and he probably has a good chance here. We are going to be split on this one. For me, it's the athletic ability of Greg Hardy. I just think he can move better than Yorgan De Castro. If he needs to do a type of performance where he's on his bike, he's circling, he's backpedaling, the type of performance he did against Ben Sassoli, minus the inhaler, then Greg Hardy has a strong path to victory over 15 minutes. But I wouldn't be surprised if Greg Hardy was able to land a beautiful overhand, a beautiful hook. Greg Hardy is very athletically gifted. He's quick. He moves very well for the size of man he is. So I'm going to stick with Mr. Controversial. So the pick is going to be Greg Hardy via TKO in round number 2. And we have some odds. We have Greg Hardy coming in minus 170, minus 160, minus 180. Yorgan De Castro coming back plus 150, plus 160, plus 140. Yeah, the line seems to be pretty solid there. Maybe Greg Hardy should be down from minus 180 a little bit. But the line seems solid. You know, either guy has the ability to win this fight. Castro isn't a big underdog, and rightfully so. Maybe that line will be even closer come fight night. For me, I'm going to stick with Greg Hardy. He's athletically gifted, man. He can just move in ways Yorgan De Castro can't. Co-main event time, my homies. We have Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. And we're going to start with the former champion. Which one? The Brazilian one. Jessica Andrade comes into this fight 11 wins, 5 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon. A former fighter of the 135 weight class. Since stepping down to 115, she's been a bully here. Most girls can't handle Jessica's power. She hits like a man, not a 115-pound fighter. If you haven't got the footwork of Joanna or the punching power and technical ability of Wiley, Jessica Andrade is going to be a problem for anyone. Rose Namajunas comes into this fight 6-3 inside the UFC. A very well-rounded fighter. Striking and grappling, Rose is a very technical fighter. We see a lot of evidence for that in both of her fights against Joanna. Super technical kickboxing. Her movement makes her a very hard target for the opponent. Both of these girls have already fought each other. The first round looked very, very good for Rose. She was able to hurt Jessica a few times. She looked like she would go on to completely outclass Jessica the way Joanna did a few years ago. In the second round, Rose got tired of beating Jessica up. It was like that Simpsons episode where Homer's just getting punched over and over and over, and then the opponent gets tired and Homer hits him once, and the opponent drops down and Homer wins. Same kind of thing for this fight. Rose got tired of hitting Jessica, and if you show weakness or fatigue against Jessica, she's going to bulldoze you or slam you on your head, and that's what happened. This time it's a 3-round fight, and that in my opinion suits Rose better. She'll be more composed with her output, I feel, in a 15-minute fight as opposed to a 25-minute fight. So for those reasons, I am going to take Rose Namajunas to have a big comeback rematch against Jessica Andrade and potentially win a close decision in this fight. So the pick's going to be Rose via decision. And we take a look at some odds for that matchup. We have, if I can find it, man, again, Rose Namajunas minus 220, minus 210. Jessica Andrade plus 160, plus 170. Even going up to close to plus 2. So this card, we have some big favourites who should probably be a little bit smaller favourites. You know, keep them favourites. But minus 220 on Rose Namajunas when she just got dunked on her head by the same girl, Jessica Andrade, just a little bit crazy. You'd have to imagine, though, that maybe she's minus 220 because it is a 3-round fight. You know, I feel she is going to be more composed with her output, move a little more rather than punch a little more. Kind of understandable, but you'd think more people would put money on Jessica here, you know, because she has beaten Rose. But for me, I am going to take Rose Namajunas here. Oh man, it's the main event time. We have Tony El Kakui Ferguson versus Justin the Highlight Gaethje. And if you haven't used the technique on the like button, do something with it, man. Head kick it, put it in self-isolation, let me know. Let's start with Tony Ferguson. Tony comes into this fight 15-1 inside the UFC. Primarily a crazy man inside the octagon. Cardio, 11 out of 10. This man does not stop. He will attack your legs, your body, and your head. He doesn't discriminate areas of pain. He will look to injure each and every part of your temple. The jiu-jitsu of Tony I don't want to speak about too much. We know Tony will look to throw up a lot of triangles off his back or look to dash choke you. I want to speak about Tony's stand-up ability. A lot of people say Tony Ferguson will tire you out. And that's true. That's a true statement in my opinion. He does. But how does he do it? And why? Is what I want to speak about. It's the body work. I'm telling you guys, Tony Ferguson has some of the best body work you will ever watch. His constant stabbing body kicks are nothing short of disgusting. The first hurts, but the 20th one makes you want to quit. Tony Ferguson is a soul taker, just like Khabib, but he does it in a very different way. Justin Gaethje comes into this fight 4-2 inside the UFC. Just like Tony, this guy is primarily a crazy man inside the octagon. If you was teaching a young kid the word toughness, you'd show them Justin Gaethje getting hit and still moving forward. Justin Gaethje has some of the best low kicks in MMA. He'll chop you low multiple times to set you up with his fight-ending kill shots. The only way we've seen Justin Gaethje beaten so far in the UFC is through toughness. You have to take many Justin Gaethje kicks and punches before you can put him away. Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier both had brilliant wars with Justin Gaethje. Here's my final verdict. Both of these guys are stars. Justin Gaethje is a madman and Tony Ferguson defies the madman too. As always with this channel, I'll give you my honest opinion. I did that with the Bronx, Figueiredo, Paul Felder, Dom Reyes. My honest feelings are Tony Ferguson is just too much of a killer, man. I have entertained the idea of taking Gaethje in this fight, but I just can't do it. And here's why. Justin fights with a high guard, and Tony Ferguson absolutely loves to kick the body. If Tony is able to kick the body just 10 times in that first round, I think that'll be enough to slow down Justin Gaethje and put him into a real dogfight. The type of dogfight that Tony loves. Now, for anyone saying Tony will definitely win, you need to go watch more MMA fights. For anyone saying Gaethje will win because Tony versus Khabib is cursed, don't decide on that. Break down this fight. The truth is, either of these guys could win. They're great fighters. But my final verdict for this matchup is body kicks. Tony's body kicks are lethal and constant. If you haven't got an answer for the body kicks, chances are Tony's going to take your soul. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Tony Ferguson via TKO in round number 3. We take a look at some odds here. We have Tony Ferguson coming in minus 160, minus 170, minus 180. Gaethje plus 130, plus 140, plus 150. Like I said, if you're extremely confident in picking this main event, you need to go back and watch more fights. There is no extreme confident pick in this fight because both of these guys are stars. but I have to stick with Tony Ferguson. The body work. Honestly, guys, rewatching his last few fights, I felt a sharp stabbing pain in my midsection just watching his kicks each round. Nothing short of disgusting. And that's why these opponents slow down. And Tony's, I feel, is going to do that to Justin Gaethje. He holds his hands very high with the high guard, leaves the body open. And that's going to be a target for Tony. From the first second to the 5th minute, he's going to look to target the body. Alright, homies. I've enjoyed breaking down this card. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Use the technique on the like button if you haven't already. And I'm really looking forward to catching you guys in the comment section, because this fight is what, 2 weeks away, like 10 days away. So we're going to have a lot of time to speak in the comments. So catch you guys there. Peace.